All right. Good evening, everybody. Give me a thumbs up if you can. Just let me know you can hear me okay. Just checking the sound. Let me know it's all right. All right. Thank you, Samir. East Coast, staying up late. Always good to have you with us. We'll go ahead and join palms as we get started. And you can repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. And keeping the palms joined. And putting the palms down. All right. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for being here. My name is Jeff, and I'll be leading you tonight. Excuse me. I always like to start with a question just to kind of get everybody engaged and communicating a little bit. I gave a talk last night. No, 2 nights ago, Sunday night, for the college group on the precepts. And it's always a great talk, a great topic for any age, but especially the college age. So I'll start with that as a question tonight. If you're not familiar, maybe I'll talk on them later tonight, but if you're not familiar with the 5 precepts in Buddhism, they are to refrain from lying, refrain from killing, really is harming, but often translated as killing, stealing, refrain from stealing, refrain from sexual misconduct, and to refrain from intoxicants or anything that alters the state of mind. So I think my question for you all tonight to get started, just before we begin the meditation, is which of the 5 precepts are most challenging for you? Again, it is to refrain from lying, killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, and intoxicants, drugs, alcohol, anything that alters the mind. So I'm going to go ahead and type that in here. If you are new, you'll see a chat box there on your screen. Feel free to type in your response, as brief or lengthy as you'd like. Which of the 5 precepts are most challenging for you? Refrain from lying. How do you spell lying? Oh yeah, L-I-E, right? Right? Well, we'll go with it. No, it's L-Y. How about do not lie? That's funny. Refrain from lying, killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, and intoxicants. Funny, now I'm spelling line like 5 different ways. I'm going to go with this, and you can correct me. Which of the 5 precepts are most challenging for you? Refrain from lying, killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, and intoxicants. There's my question for us as we get started. So again, if you're new, there's a chat box there on your screen. Feel free to just type in your response. With these precepts, all right. Did I spell it right? Awesome. Thanks, Samir. With these precepts, and again, maybe I'll touch on them later after the meditation, but just a few comments now while people are sharing their responses. They're really set up as guidelines. I don't take them from the Buddhist teachings as rules. I take them as points of practice to recognize that throughout our lives, most of us, if not all of us, have at some point in time acted in ways that where we would lie or kill or steal or commit sexual misconduct or use intoxicants. And it's important, I think, to understand that when we do those things, there's a tremendous impact on ourselves and on those around us. So a lot of harming, which is really the second precept, comes from these behaviors and these actions. And I've always really looked at precepts as red lights, in a sense that when you come to a red light, you have a choice. And we all think maybe that we must stop at a red light, but you don't have to. You can do whatever you want at the red light. You can stop. Most of us, I hope, choose to, but you could also run the red light. And if we were in person here, I would always ask, what happens if you run the red light? And some people say, maybe you get pulled over, maybe you get into an accident, you get a ticket, you hurt someone. And someone usually eventually says, maybe you get away with it. And that's true as well, that maybe you just get through the red light and you got there quicker and no harm was done. So a lot of things can happen when you stop or go through a red light, or when you don't stop and you go through a red light. And the precepts are really the same way. Karmically, it acts a little bit differently because any of these actions, lying, killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, or intoxicants, there's this the karma that we carry with that, the karma that comes from these actions. But these are really wonderful points of practice to ask yourselves, how often do I do these things? And why do I do these things? The 6 paramitas, which I talk about all the time, which is the practice of the bodhisattva, and that was my talk the other night, was on the 6 paramitas. The second one is morality, and morality is the 5 precepts. So you cannot practice the paramitas without practicing the precepts. And the precepts total, there were between 227 and 311 precepts that were laid out by the Buddha. And these were set up as really actions, behaviors that helped create a healthy community. So, and I don't, which is really not too much of a surprise, but usually by this point in the evening, which is all of 9 minutes in, and I've already phrased my question, there would be tons of responses here. So all I see is Samir kindly making sure that I'm spelling the word lying. I see Amy afraid to go on record, and assuming I know what her answer is. I see Marisa laughing at Amy. Samir says, for me, harming others through anger and ignorance and a lack of wisdom. Marisa, I've had the challenges with all of them, and my difficulty with them rotates depending on the day. So feel free. Again, I know these are ones that it might not be so comfortable to talk about or to share. But the reality is most people today have done all of these, or many of them. So can we be honest with ourselves? And the last thing I'll say is not in a judgment way. This isn't about judging ourselves or thinking that we're a terrible person because we lied to somebody or whatever it might be. But to be honest with yourself, again, part of lying is having a truthful, honest view of yourself, and being able to very openly recognize these things. So lying, killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, and intoxicants. All right, what else do we have here? So I read Marisa's, Nicole, intoxicants. I have chemo, insomnia, and need help sleeping. Amy, okay, intoxicants. I appreciate your willingness to play along, Amy. And yes, I did know the answer to that from Dharma Bum Life program, but thanks for sharing it. Let's see. Oh, Chantel. Hey, Jeff. For me, it's intoxicants as a coping mechanism. Yep. Also lying, and I used to steal a lot as a teenager. Roberto, at this point, only lying and sexual misconduct. The rest will end me fast if I indulge. So again, these are things to become aware of. I appreciate all of you sharing. And for those who didn't share, that's fine as well. But I think it's really good to begin to ask yourself, where do I struggle with these on a day-to-day basis? And I've found a great practice to take one a day. So if someone has a challenge with lying, then starting tomorrow, try to go through your day without lying, whatever it might be, and just really see how dependent you are on these ways of being that are tied to the precepts. So, all right. So we may touch on that later, but I appreciate y'all sharing. Again, I know it's not always so comfortable, even though it's, just typing on a screen here. It's still requiring a level and a sense of vulnerability, which I appreciate y'all doing. So we'll go ahead and start with the meditation practice. A couple of things I'll tell you before we begin. For those who might be new, nothing's going to happen to you. You won't float away. You won't have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long won't shut off. Don't judge your practice, meaning don't ask yourself if it's working or not working. We're just going to sit and breathe, okay? Posture, you want to be comfortable. If you're on a cushion, it helps slide into the front third, pushing the stomach forward. Allows the back to straighten. Shoulders are relaxed. Hands can be on the knees or in the lap, whatever's comfortable for you. I will guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. Most important, however, don't expect silence. We're just going to sit and breathe. And starting with the eyes closed if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, we'll settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention and focus to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath. Expecting nothing but to sit and breathe. As the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it, release that thought, return attention, focus to the breath. Where's your mind? Lost in thought, return to breath. Letting go of expectations, letting go of judgments from the practice. Just sitting, breathing. Keeping the mind alert, aware of each sound, each thought, each physical sensation, yet concerned with nothing but sitting, breathing. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle, know what it's like to just sit and breathe, knowing with each breath there's nothing else to do, nowhere else to go, no one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. And once again, taking 3 deep breaths slowly. And as you slowly open the eyes, slowly begin to move. Most important with the practice of meditation is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how we sit and hold the hands or cross the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. has everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being no different than any one of us who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. What that means very simply for all of us, regardless of where we come from or what we believe in, where we think we're going, our whole life is filled with things that happen. We react. More stuff happens, more reactions. That's it. This practice is learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because that's the way we've responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how we respond to everything else that's happening throughout our days. So all we're working on is closing the gap where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. It's not an easy practice. It's not necessarily fun. It's not an escape. We have so many things we use as escapes, a lot of them tied to the precepts. This practice is direct perception into the present moment and learning to be with things as they are. And sometimes that's really uncomfortable for us. Learning to sit with life in its unpleasant manner is a challenge. But the Buddha taught very clearly that we have tremendous aversion to many things and people and places. And so we are constantly seeking relief from these aversions, running towards pleasure, running away from pain. And on many levels, I understand that. We want ourselves to be healthy and happy and comfortable, and that's very important. But it's also important to recognize mentally and emotionally the challenges we have. And are we able to see the impermanence of each situation, the lessons to be learned from each situation, the experiences we have as we grow? And when we experience pain at times in a safe way, can we be with that and sit with it and not just run from it? And that's where the meditation practice is so important, because it allows us to just sit and be with life as it is. Maybe you're in a good mood right now, maybe in a bad mood. Maybe you are enjoying the sounds around you of silence or whatever it might be, or maybe you don't like the sounds around you. Maybe you feel pleasant from a conversation you had earlier, or maybe you feel unpleasant from a conversation you had. All of these things are going on around us. And yet we come together to sit and just be still and present with life as it is. So much of our day is really the same thing. Can we just be with our day as it arises? Pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. Thoughts arise, thoughts pass. This is it. So with that, I'll stop. I always prefer to turn it over to questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with. If you are new, I think it's important to understand that, at least for me, Buddhist practice is very simple to understand and very difficult to implement into our lives. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. It's simply sitting, breathing, and learning to be kind to yourself and everybody else around you. So with that, I'll turn over to questions. Again, there's a chat box on your screen there. Feel free to type in anything around meditation, Buddhist practice, and I'll take the next about 20 minutes, 15, 20 minutes, and just respond to your questions. I'll just share as we're waiting for the questions to come in. Again, coming back to the precepts, that if you think about what I just mentioned, how the meditation practice is learning to be with things as they are, and then you think about why we lie and kill and steal or commit sexual misconduct or use intoxicants, it almost always comes back to us not liking things the way they are and being uncomfortable with the way things are. So we lie and harm and steal and have sexual misconduct and use intoxicants to try to make our situation more comfortable, to make it easier for us, to make it better for us. Yes, I understand there's those rare situations where, and the question always comes up about white lies and is it okay to lie to protect and things like that. And I respect those questions and I answer them honestly, but very often those are not the major issues in our lives. I've yet to meet the person who asks if it's okay to tell white lies and have that be the only time that they ever lie. So I understand the thoughts around lying to protect people or things like that. And I think each situation is unique and each situation carries its own, your own intention behind it. And the Buddha talks a lot about the intention. Is your intention to be a benefit to others or to harm others? So, we can ask ourselves these questions, but I think when we look at the precepts honestly, one can tend to make a lot of justifications and excuses in their own mind as to why we do certain things. So, and as I said earlier, and I'll continue to say around the precepts, these are not shared for someone to judge themselves. Years ago, it's like 10 years ago, and we had just done a talk on the precepts, and the next day or 2 nights later, he shared that, in the last 24 to 48 hours, he had broken all 5 of the precepts. And so these are things that are not meant to make yourself feel like you're a bad person or to judge yourself, but to be very clear about how these impact our lives. So, thoughts, questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with? Let's see. Samir, can you define sexual misconduct with the context of the precepts? Yeah, it's. I think it's first important to understand that when the Buddha was alive and he taught and he had the disciples, that they chose a celibate path, that they left the lay life, the life of worldly pleasures as it's often described, and they chose to live a life where They did not have any sort of intimate and even physical contact with anyone. It's in the Vinaya still. And if you go to Metaforest, where the monks are here and up in north Escondido, the Theravada monks, they won't have physical contact with you, and they're very careful. For example, and again, they take these precepts very literally. But if there's a monk sitting there and a female were to come up, they would very likely remove themselves from that situation, very pleasantly, of course, but they follow the precepts very, very closely, to not have anything to arouse the mind that could lead to craving, desire, sense, pleasures. So this is really what that precept is about, is guarding ourselves from the sense pleasures. And again, as the monks who follow the precepts, there was no physical contact, no intimate interactions at all. As Buddhism has spread, and you have various traditions and lineages for 2,500 years, for the most part, Buddhist monks and nuns continue to practice that life of celibacy and no intimate physical contact and relationships. Japanese Zen priests, for example, about 1,000 years ago, Buddhism was dying in Japan. And so they decided to allow the Zen priests to marry, and therefore they could raise children who would continue on the tradition of Buddhism in their families. So there are some variations to it. So that's one way to look at sexual misconduct from the monastic standpoint, which none of us are. So when you look at it from a lay perspective, the way I learn these teachings and really translate them into my life is when you have any sort of intimate interaction, relationship with somebody, are you in a loving, committed relationship? Is it honest? Do both people understand what and why they're doing what they're doing? Or are you just out, seeking, craving, desiring for your own personal satisfaction and gain and joy? Is there honesty around any sort of sexual interactions? Are you just out hooking up, or do you actually know the person and care about them, and are you in a committed, loving relationship with them? They're very, these two things are very different. Are you in a loving, committed relationship and honest with that person, allowing the sexual interactions to be very genuine, or the opposite of that is, are these just strangers or someone you don't really know and you don't really care? So what we look at, what's in our mind, sexual misconduct with pornography, things that we view, anything that leads the mind to that craving and desire, anything that is incredibly disrespectful to the human. Again, discussing intoxicants and sexual misconduct with college kids is always, having that experience is always interesting, because there's so much of that exists in a college campus, and it's so much embedded into the college lifestyle and the college culture. But Samir, also very specifically, it's, as I mentioned, it's to look at what is your intention, right? What is one's intention? What are your thoughts? When you look at someone, what do you think when you see them? Are they kind, caring, loving thoughts, or are you just looking at them as objects in a physical manner? So a lot of it is the intention and the way we view people. So hopefully that's helpful. Denise, when I was younger, I lied all the time trying to cover up my weird family life. Yeah, sure. That's kind of an example of things I mentioned earlier that, it's hard because I understand that there are times in our lives where we are lying for certain reasons. And a lot of times that comes back to, again, like you said, you wanted to cover up your family life. So there was maybe the embarrassment. I don't know the details, but I'm just giving some examples. The weird family life could mean, we're uncomfortable, we're embarrassed, we're ashamed, we're afraid, or whatever it might be. And so we don't want people to know something. And so therefore we lie to kind of cover that up. So hoarding, well, there you go. So trying to cover that up. So, these are things that we're often lying to cover the truth of things. And it's important to understand why we do that. Marisa, the best description of sexual misconduct that I heard is that it's misconduct if you wouldn't tell someone you respect about it. Yeah, it's a good way to look at it for sure. And I think very often we know ourselves if it is or isn't, if it is genuine and caring and loving, or if it's not. We typically know that. And so, like you said, if there are people that we respect and we wouldn't share it with them, I think that's another great indicator. All right, intoxicants. What about intoxicants used with the context of mental health treatment? That seems to be a growing area of science. So again, another kind of question around these precepts that comes up very often, with, say, the legalization of marijuana, for example, and then people using that as like a way to defend their use of intoxicants. And I'll finish that and then I'll come back to your question, Samir. But, this isn't about what's legal or illegal. This is about why we use certain things, right? So, and I think it's the same thing with medicine for mental health, right? Now, I'll just go on the record very clearly and say that, look, those of you who see, which I know many people in Buddhist communities do, whether you're seeing a psychiatrist or psychologist, whatever counseling you're in and whatever prescriptions you've been given, learning about Buddhist practice doesn't mean that all of a sudden you just stop taking your meds for anxiety or depression or whatever it might be, but it's to understand why you're taking them and what's at the root cause of them. And so it's one thing to use prescription medicine for mental health treatment. It's another thing to abuse prescription medicine for mental health treatment. It's one thing to use any intoxicant for a period of time, and it's another to become addicted to where it consumes your life. So I think you just have to ask yourself, what is the reason you're doing it? There's lots of things. Again, intoxicants often gets translated as drugs and alcohol, or the fifth precept of no intoxicants, but it's really anything that alters the state of mind. So, we could say coffee, we could say chocolate. There's, I think it's garlic, I believe, in the Vinaya, in the teachings of the Buddha, that he said they should refrain from because of the desires that could come from these foods. So I think it's important to understand that this, like all the precepts, is to ask yourself, why am I doing it? What is the intention behind it, right? Someone years ago shared that when they were a teenager, they had really bad migraines, and the doctor prescribed, pretty heavy narcotic medication for these migraines, and they didn't want to get hooked on them, but they were using them, and then they had smoked marijuana, and they felt that their migraines went away. So they made the choice to use the marijuana versus the prescription medication. And then my question to this person was, well, okay, so do you use it just for migraines, or are you using it 5 times a day? And so what had started out as something they were using for the migraines became a habit where they were just stoned all day long. So I think we have to be very, again, honest with why we are doing these things. And I, come from a place where I have all 5 precepts for a long time. I kind of lived by the opposite of all of that. And again, a lot of that comes from your own struggles, your own anger, your own depression, your own challenges. And so we tend to not follow these precepts, because not following them tends to bring us lots of satisfaction. But the root of it is, again, for each person, why are we doing it? Not judging yourself, but asking yourself honestly, right? If I'm getting high every day, why am I doing this every day? If I'm lying every day, why am I doing this every day? And begin to explore the root. So, all right, other questions? Hope that answered the question, Samir. We'll do one more question before we wrap up. The precepts are tough ones because, often we turn to meditation and Buddhist practice because we want to feel good. We want to feel better. We want the meditation to help us relax and de-stress. And we want to look at the Buddhist teachings because we think it's going to bring us a sense of peace. And then you get the precepts thrown at you as these really fundamental core teachings of trying not to lie, kill, steal, commit sexual misconduct, or intoxicants. And people are like, whoa, well, that's no fun. That sucks. So it's really forcing you and challenging you to question your actions and behaviors. Because I don't know about you, but for me, when I began to change my behaviors, all the misery and depression started to go away. And therefore, the need for all of those things also went away. So tough to look at, but very important. Jesse, I lie to myself mostly, which caused internal drama. Yeah, that's a common one I hear a lot. The level of honesty that we have with ourselves is often not too great. And even without even knowing it, we have a story that we tell ourselves about ourselves, and that story is really it's not true. We don't even necessarily mean to be lying to ourselves, but, we've all created this story about who we are, and this idea of who we think we are is very different from who we actually are. So, but yeah, lying to ourselves is tough. Or being honest with ourselves is tough. And so when we lie, it's very difficult. It's a challenge. All right. Anything else before we close? All right. So we'll go ahead and join palms. We'll do a transfer of merit as we wrap up. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit gained be transferred to those who need it most. All right, just a few announcements before you all head off. Thanks for being here. My name is Jeff. I'm a Dharma bum. We opened up the temple initially downtown San Diego 14 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. So those of us who lead, we're not monks, we're not nuns, we're not gurus, we're not masters, we're not teachers, we're not looking for students. We're just practitioners. We do our best to take our understanding of Buddhist teachings and put it into terms that hopefully make sense. So every night we have different practices going on. Everything is virtual now. We closed 10 days from now will have been a year. March 12th, we closed 1 year ago due to the pandemic, so we could be safe and not put anyone at risk. So everything is virtual. Every night, every morning, there are classes, teenage group, college group. Our recovery sangha is huge. All that's on the Dharma Bums website. You'll see the schedule. Also, we have a new virtual volunteer program. We had a great first meeting. Thanks to all who showed up on Sunday. Our next meeting will be this Sunday again at 3:00, continuing to craft a really wonderful volunteer program that we can carry on virtually. The book study is still going. Maurice has been leading that using Pristine Mind. That's twice a month on Saturday afternoons. And we also will start at the end of this month on Monday night a new book study, Zen focus, using the book Zen Seeds. That is also, or is available through Buddha for You. The gift shop is also closed, but if you go online, Buddha for You, you can see the website. So Ken, our great Zen practitioner, will lead that on Monday night, starting I think the 22nd. So I wish you all well. Please stay home, wear a mask, do what you can to be safe and not put anybody else at risk. Thank you so much.